Hello. Today we are going to look at multiplying integers. And we know that integers are our positive and negative whole numbers and zero. And because we have these negative numbers, we have to be more careful with multiplying integers than we would have been when we just had to deal with natural numbers, the numbers that we're more familiar with. And because of this extra complication, it can be useful to think about multiply in a slightly different way than we might have thought about it before. We're probably used to thinking of multiply as groups of stuff. So if I had 3 multiplied by 2, I could think about that as 3 plus 3. So I have 3 added to itself twice. So I could have had 3 plus 3 would have been 3 multiplied by 2. And I would have said that I was at 3 and I added another 3. So I ended up at 6. This is a perfectly good way of thinking about multiply, and it has gotten us very far. But there's another way that we can think about multiply. And just to remind you, we could have just as easily said that we had 2 plus 2 plus 2. We could have said we had 3 2's multiplied together, or we could have said that we had 2 3's multiplied together. Now, there's another way of thinking about multiply, and as I say, it may be more useful to us now that we get into the more complicated matter of integers. So when we're multiplying by a number, we can think that we stretch the number, or we say scale it, away from 0. And we know 0 can be called the origin. So if we come back to our sum here, 3 by 2, we could say that, well, we have a distance of 3 units away from the origin. That's where we start. And we're going to go twice as far away from the origin. We're multiplying by 2. We're going to go twice as far away. So we scale it by a factor of 2. So we go twice as far away from 0. We end up at 6. So that's another way of thinking about multiply. It works the same way. It will give you the same answer, but it's another way of thinking about it that can be useful when we're dealing with this type of number work now, when we're dealing with integers. So again, we can think about multiply as we start out a particular distance away from 0, from the origin, and then we scale up by a factor of, in this case, 2. We go twice as far away from 0 as we were when we started, if we multiply by 2. So that's a way of thinking about multiply. Now, the core thing for multiplying integers, where we have minuses going on in our multiply, is as follows. Multiplying by a minus, I have a minus in brackets, I know brackets means multiply, rotates the number around the origin, around 0, by 180 degrees. And I know that a straight line has 180 degrees. So if I started out facing to the right, and I rotated through 180 degrees, I'd end up facing out to the left. So say if we multiplied our 6 by a minus, we would rotate around the 0 all the way around to minus 6. So we would keep the same distance from 0, but we would rotate around our number line over to minus 6 if we multiplied by a minus. Now we're going to see that play out in lots of our examples as we go through. So we can see we have lots of examples to go through here to get a feel for these rules. But this rule in practice leads to these outcomes here. If I multiply a positive number by a positive number, I get a positive number. Plus by plus gives me plus. Now I can see here I have brackets around my plus signs because I have a positive multiplied by a positive. I know that brackets mean multiply. So if I have 2 brackets sitting together, they're multiplied. These rules are only true for multiply and divide. They also work for divide. If we try to use them for addition or subtraction, we will get the wrong answer. These are only for multiplication and division. So brackets mean multiply. So this is how we're going to write these out. Plus multiplied by plus will give me plus. Plus multiplied by minus will give me minus. Minus multiplied by plus will give me minus. Minus multiplied by minus will give me plus. These are the results that we get from this understanding of multiplying minuses by numbers. So this is the rule that gives these outcomes. So if we can understand this by putting it into practice, then we will understand these rules and we'll be able to do our maths better. But these rules are very useful for giving us an anchor. So anytime we're going to do multiplication or division by integers or with integers, we're always going to write this up in the top corner of our copy. And eventually we won't need to keep writing it. We'll get so used to doing this that we'll just know the rules in our head. But the only way we get to that point is by every time we want to do multiply or divide of integers, we're going to write this up in our copy for now. So this is what we write every single time we want to do multiply or divide of integers for now. And eventually we won't need it, but right now we do. Now, let's look at how these rules come to be from our rule that we started with, that multiplying by minus rotates us around the origin. So here we start out, and I've already done this example, we are stretching our 3 twice as far away from 0, and we end up at 6. And I didn't have to do any rotation here because there's no minuses involved. I haven't multiplied by a minus number. But here I do have a minus number. Here I start at plus 4, so I'm 4 units away from the origin, and I multiply by minus 2. So how am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to multiply my numbers together first. So forget about the minus for a second. 4 multiplied by 2. Well, that means I start at 4 and I go twice as far away from the origin. So I go all the way up to 8. So fine, I am 8 units away from the origin, but I've multiplied by a minus number. And then I think about my rule. That means I have to rotate around by 180 degrees, and I end up down at minus 8. So I started at plus 8, and I rotated around, and I want to keep the same distance away from 0. So I'm rotating this arm around like the arm of a clock, and I end up down at minus 8. So I end up at minus 8. And I can see here I had a positive number. If there's no sign in front of it, I know there's a secret plus in front of it. So I have a positive number multiplied by a minus number, and I've ended up with a minus number. And I had that rule up here, plus multiplied by minus gives me minus, and now we have a story for why that's true. We multiplied our numbers out, got 8, and then because we multiplied by a minus, we're going to rotate around on our 0 point and end up down at minus 8. So let's put that into practice again. If we have minus 3, so we're minus 3 units away from the 0, and then we multiply by 2. Well, that means we get twice as far away from 0, from the origin. But I'm not multiplying by a minus number, I'm multiplying by a positive number. So there's no rotation that I have to do. I didn't rotate around my origin or anything like that. I just multiplied by 2. So I get twice as far away from the origin as I started. So I was at minus 3, and I get twice as far away. And I can see on my number line, I just end up down at minus 6. And here again, I can see minus multiplied by plus has given me a minus. And we can see why that's true. So let's again put it into practice. We have minus 5 multiplied by minus 3 up here. Minus multiplied by minus I know should give me a plus, but let's see if that works out when we use our story. So we start at minus 5. And I multiply by minus 3. So we deal with the number part first. Multiply by 3. Well, that means I end up 3 times as far away from the origin. So I go all the way down. I go twice as far away to minus 10, 3 times as far away as minus 15. So I've gone all the way down to minus 15, but I multiplied by a minus 3. So now I deal with the signs, and I have to multiply by a minus, so I rotate all the way around, and I end up at plus 15. So I've rotated around by, if I can write this in, I have rotated all the way around 180 degrees, so there's my 180 degrees. I've rotated all the way around up to plus 15. So that is our answer. We're going to go up to plus 15. And again, minus multiplied by minus gives me my plus. And I can see why based on my number line work. So the number line is very important for getting a feel for these rules. So we're going to try and use it for as long as we can to get a feel for what we're doing. Now, we have a slightly different type of problem coming up for us now, in that we have minus multiplied by minus 4. So there's a few different ways you can think about this, but the first one we can think about is you can imagine that there's a minus 1. So if there's a minus sitting outside of a bracket, you can imagine that there's a minus 1 there. If you feel more comfortable thinking about it that way, you won't run into any problems thinking about it that way. But in general, we can still use our rule, or we can use our drawings here. So we'd have minus 4. So we'd start down at minus 4. Start down at minus 4, and we'd multiply by a minus. So this time we don't need to worry about multiplying by a number, or you can think about multiplying by 1 if you like. And we are going to multiply by minus, so that means we rotate. So we're going to rotate around by 180 degrees, and we're going the same distance away from the origin, from 0, but we're going to have rotated through 180 degrees, and that means we end up at plus 4. And again, we can see minus multiplied by minus gave me plus. Now we get into some slightly more complicated problems. We have a minus multiplied by plus 3 multiplied by minus 4. So now we need to do step by step, how are we going to solve our problems? You can multiply these in any order you like. I'm going to do my plus 3 multiplied by minus 4 first, but you could multiply your minus into your 3 first, and that would work as well. So I start at plus 3. 3 units away from the origin, and I multiply by 4, and I deal with my number first, so multiply by the 4, so I would end up at 4 times as far from the origin, so I would end up all the way up at 12, and then I multiply by a minus, so I'm going to have to rotate around through 180 degrees and end up down at minus 12. So when I multiply plus 3 by minus 4, I end up at minus 12. So my next line would look like minus 12. These two multiplied together give me my minus 12, because I had my 3 by 4 and then did my multiplying by a minus, and I end up down at minus 12. Next question, I'm going to multiply by minus again. So I'm at minus 12, and now I rotate again by 180 degrees and end up all the way back at plus 12. And then we continue on. So here I see I have minus 2 squared. Well, I'm always very careful. What does squared mean? It means I multiply a number by itself twice, 2 times. And now I know I'm starting at minus 2. And I multiply by 2. I deal with my number part first, and I end up down at minus 4. And then I have to multiply by the minus. So I end up rotating around up to plus 4. So I end up at plus 4. Next, I have another squared, so I have minus 3 multiplied by minus 3. And I'm going to start at minus 3. And I multiply by 3. I deal with my number first, and I end up down at minus 9. But I had to multiply by a minus 3, so I rotate all the way around up to plus 9. So I end up with minus by plus 9, and then minus multiplied by 9 is going to bring me back to minus 9. Then we have minus 2 by minus 3 brings me down to minus 6, and then up to 6, and then multiplying by minus 1 brings me down to minus